Um, so hi, Julie. I've got Julie Tupler from the Tupler Technique online, and I just wanted to welcome her to the phone call.
Thanks so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. I'm always excited to share, anything about the Tupler technique that I can.
Perfect. Well, I have a few questions that I get asked time and time again about the Tupler technique, and I always answer people, but I thought what better way to answer them than to ask Julie Tupler herself. So that's why I decided to get you on the line. So I'll go ahead. The first question I'm going to ask is, as physiotherapists, we assess and treat each individual client dependent on their specific needs. The Tupler technique appears to be a set protocol of exercises. How can this address each individual's specific needs?
The Tupler technique is a specific protocol, but within the protocol, we modify it depending upon the issues that the client has. So the Tupler technique is all about healing connective tissue, and it does this three ways. It does this by positioning both the muscles and the connective tissue with the diastasis rehab splint, with double splinting. And it's important to position the connective tissue because we want to take the stretch off of it. And it's important to position the muscles because in order for them to move in the right direction, front to back, they have to be close together. And we find that if there's a forefinger or more diastasis, the muscles will move sideways. So that will be stretching the connective tissue. The second thing is protecting the connective tissue from getting stretched, either stretched in a forward direction or a sideways direction. And the third thing is strengthening both the muscles and the abdominal muscles and the connective tissue. The program is 4 steps. The exercises, 2-seated in the head lift, wearing the splint, also double splinting, which is wearing one and holding a scarf or the arms of your sweater or something. We also have the kinesio tape, and then the third thing is transverse awareness, and the fourth thing is getting up and down correctly. The modifications depend upon the issues that they have. So if they have a prolapse, then we, when putting on the splint, we see if there's any downward movement in the pelvic floor, then maybe we don't use the splint initially until they have some transverse strength and awareness, and maybe have them just hold the splint when doing the exercises. And when doing the exercises, we have to make sure that they're not holding their breath, that they're counting out loud. Maybe we'll reduce the amount of reps until they can get it. So with the prolapse, we're very specific. If somebody has neck issues, then perhaps with the head lifts, we won't lift the head. We'll have them just do all 5 steps in a back-lying position. And we do this in week 4 because it's much easier to work the transverse in a seated position than in a back-lying position. So we get the transverse strength and awareness first before we do it in a back-lying position. So if they, as I said, if they do have neck issues, we would even, have them just do the 5 steps without lifting the head, just so that they get the transverse awareness in a back-lying position where it's difficult to engage it. If somebody has heart problems, perhaps, because what happens is if somebody has a diastasis for a long time and the organs move forward, once you put the splint on and you bring the muscles together, you're moving the organs back to their original position. So it will affect the organs above and below it. And I just spoke about, the prolapse issue. So if they do have, any kind of heart issues, we have them talk to their doctor about their program. and then maybe initially, again, just hold a splint when doing the exercises until they get that transverse strength and awareness. And of course, with pregnancy, we modify the program because of the pregnancy, and this program is very important during pregnancy because it's important to keep the diastasis as small as possible. Because with a large diastasis, it puts a pregnant woman at risk for a C-section, because when the muscles separate and the connective tissue stretches sideways, the top of the uterus will tilt forward. And if the top tilts forward, the cervix then will be pointing sideways. And a sideways pointing cervix, as I said, does put a pregnant woman at risk for a C-section. So it's important that the cervix be facing downward. Also, during the pregnancy, we want to make sure that they know how to push with their abdominals, relax the pelvic floor. Because if they're Valsalva, doing the Valsalva maneuver, the abdominals will be going forward forcefully, making the diastasis bigger, and then putting force on the pelvic floor, putting them at risk for a prolapse and other pelvic floor problems.
Okay.
So it's very important for them to learn how to use the muscles separately. When they're working abdominals, think of relaxing the pelvic floor. When they're working the pelvic floor, relaxing the abdominals. Now, and I just want to go back to the prolapse. When they're doing the exercises, usually I will have them pull up the pelvic floor when doing the exercises to support that. But in pregnancy, we work them separately so that when they get to, and have them practice it during the pregnancy, every time they go to the bathroom and having a bowel movement, with their feet up on a footstool to support and align the bowels. But we want them to learn how to use the abdominals and relax the pelvic floor that they've stretched and strengthened during the pregnancy. And also have the abdominal strength so that they can push for as long as they need to push. So within the program, there are modifications.
Okay.
And we're very clear with that it's not just one program for everybody.
Perfect. And that's, are you still there, Julie?
I'm here,
Oh,
yeah.
that's okay. Sorry, the light went off. But yes, and I understand that. And that's actually brings me to my next question. And you've already answered some points with it. But I've had many physiotherapists complain that the Tupler technique is not a holistic approach, as it just focuses on closing the gap. I always clarify that my experience with the technique is that anyone who trains learns and studies to address other factors too, such as posture alignment, breathing, ergonomics, lifestyle, nutrition, scar tissue, pelvic floor, and individual exercise prescription, as a lot of that you've just described. Why do you not broadcast this more, I suppose, even like on the likes of your website, in order for, I suppose, recruiting other practitioners to train in your approach?
Well, that's a good question, and perhaps I should write more about that.
Yeah.
In the section of my program called "Teach It," and that's a good idea.
Mm.
Perhaps I will say that it's within the protocol that there's modifications, and we do talk about scar mobilization. We do talk about the organ mobilization, nutrition. I have this corrective connective tissue cream, but I also talk about I have a chart that shows the nutrients for healing connective tissue, the function of the nutrients, the nutrients in food, and the ingredients in the cream. We do talk about, as I said, scar mobilization. So we talk about, because if you don't mobilize the scar, then you might have a difficult time closing the diastasis on the bottom. So yes, I probably should. I probably should mention that more.
And even the continuing education program's great to have and it's good for
Yeah,
people
the
to know that
continuing
that goes on.
education
Yeah,
program that we have,
yeah.
right, talks about more modifications.
Hmm.
Yes.
So that'd be good. Perfect. Again, you've kind of touched on this in relation to pelvic floor before, but what about clients who do not have access to a trained professional to individually assess them? Many of these women may be postpartum and high risk of pelvic floor dysfunction, pelvic organ prolapse, or even levator ani avulsion. What if the technique they use in the seated exercises is causing increased pressure on their pelvic floor?
Well, I on my website I write like with wearing the splint. If you have a prolapse or heart issues, the program needs to be modified. So I communicate that to them, and I communicate with wearing the splint. And with doing the exercise, it needs to be modified.
Mm-hmm.
So, putting it out there. So if they have questions, perhaps they can do a Skype session with somebody and get the information.
Okay.
If they don't have somebody to help them, but I do put that information out there.
Okay.
That the program does need to be modified if they have, pelvic floor or heart issues.
Okay. Many physiotherapists question the rationale of splinting as they think it will unnecessarily increase abdominal pressure and also encourage weakening of the abdominal muscles. Do you agree with this, and why is it an essential step in the Tupler Technique program?
I don't agree. I don't think that it encourages weakening of abdominal muscles. And well, first of all, and also increase abdominal pressure. And I'm going to explain why. Well, first of all, the purpose of this diastasis rehab splint is to approximate the connective tissue and the muscles. So like a cast, the function of the splint is continuously positioning connective tissue and the muscles. Positioning the connective tissue in a narrow position takes the stretch off of it and allows it to heal, as I mentioned earlier. Bringing the muscles closer together puts them in the correct position to do the exercises. When they are close together, they move front to back. When there is a forefinger or more separation, the muscles will move sideways. And again, this sideways movement stretches the connective tissue and does not strengthen the muscles. I tell clients all the time, just wearing a splint will not close your diastasis. You must do all 4 steps of the program. So, if they are doing the seated exercises, there will be no weakening of the abdominal muscles.
Okay.
All right. And when doing the exercises, we make it very clear the direction that the muscles are moving, that they're moving backwards. So if they're moving backwards, all right, and they understand that it's a backward movement, then they need to understand the difference between the muscles moving forward, which causes abdominal pressure, and the muscles moving backwards, which there's no abdominal pressure.
Okay.
All right. So the abdominal pressure comes from not knowing how to use your abdominals correctly, not from wearing a splint. Most people do abdominal exercises incorrectly and are creating abdominal pressure. For example, if somebody does a crunch, they're creating abdominal pressure because it's impossible in a back-lying position to engage the transverse abdominal muscle. So remember, wearing a splint is just positional. The Tupler technique teaches clients how to have transverse strength and awareness. So they're aware. So we say, put your hand on your belly, all right? Which direction does the muscle move? Does it move forward or does it move backwards? So once they develop that awareness, all right, then they're going to understand that increased pressure comes from a forward movement, all right? So we want them to strengthen the muscles and have an awareness of which direction the muscles are moving.
Okay.
Yeah, so so there's no weakening of the abdominal muscles because we are strengthening them.
Okay. Good.
With the seated exercises.
then I was coming on to, obviously the Tupler technique is promoted as being evidence-based. I have read the paper you referenced from Columbia State University, but it does not mention you or your specific exercises. It seems to be Pilates type exercises. Can you clarify how the Tupler technique was involved in research?
Absolutely. The initial research from Columbia, well, first of all, I have to say that, I started out many years ago just working with pregnant women. And one of the physical therapists teaching the Tupler technique program said, "Oh my God, the diastasis is," because we would check the diastasis week 1 and week 6 of the program. And she said, "Oh my God, the diastasis is getting smaller as their belly's getting bigger. Wow, 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 wow. I can't believe this. I've never seen anything like that. You need to get research." And she recommended I contacted Columbia University Program in Physical Therapy, which I did, and they were thrilled because there really wasn't anything out there on diastasis. So the initial research, which I have, and I'm certainly willing to share with anybody, we've scanned it, so anybody that wants it can get it from us. But the initial research from Columbia does credit my program and describes the exercises. When the article was published, and I saw that it was not credited and asked why, I was told just simply because of privacy issues. So that was what I was told.
Mm-hmm.
So if anyone would like to see the initial research, I'm glad to send it.
And would you not put it up on your evidence on your website, Julie, so that people can see that it is actually, affiliated with you and your exercises?
Yeah, that's something that I can probably do.
Because I get asked that quite a lot, because everybody always goes and gets the paper that you've referenced, and I think everybody's take on it usually is, "Oh, well, that doesn't sound like the Tupler technique," or "that doesn't say Julie Tupler." So it would be really good for kind of, I suppose, helping people understand that that was you who had a play in that research.
Right. So yes, I could probably say that I, was told that because of privacy issues, and here's the original research. Yes, I probably should do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
It'd be good for you.
That's a good suggestion.
Perfect. Next question, right? Recent research by Paul Hodges and Dan Lee has challenged how we understand the rehab of diastasis recti, as it demonstrated that tension across the linea alba is essential for restoring function in the abdominal wall. And in some cases, this may mean widening of the linea alba in regards to getting optimal recruitment of the muscles. What are your thoughts on this? And do you solely focus on closing the gap?
Well, I agree that tension in connective tissue is key in treating it. And by approximating the muscles, putting the connective tissue in a narrow position with the splint, and then doing the exercises with the backward tension, with this compression, I feel does help close the diastasis. And Dr. Helen Langevin, a neurologist at the University of Vermont, has formulated a medical hypothesis suggesting that connective tissue might comprise an elaborate communication system within the body, which influences the functioning of all of the other physiological systems. In her article, and I don't know if you know this article, Connective Tissue, a body-wide signaling network, she explores the possibility that there might be a series of remote effects in unrelated parts of the body stemming from changes or activity in the connective tissue. And this is what was really exciting to me. She talks about the connective tissue generating electric currents through mechanical activity, including compression, which, by my estimation, would certainly include the Tupler technique isometric exercises, which could change and she believes it can change the cellular activity in any given interrelated part of the body.
Okay.
Also, what's interesting about this research is that there can be long-term overall changes to connective tissue throughout the body, resulting from new movement patterns in connective tissue from a certain area. She confirms that connective tissue remodels itself in terms of density and elasticity, which I have seen with my program as a result of new types of mechanical stresses. So my exercises, by putting the connective tissue and the muscles in the right position, and then having those backward compression exercises, these isometric exercises, is this mechanical stress. So this is namely exercise. While Langevin brings light to how ailments in connective tissue in one area of the body may impact problems in other areas, which one would not ordinarily think were related, I am seeing the inverse here. If we improve and heal connective tissue in our core, perhaps those signals will go rippling through to other parts of our body as well. This hypothesis, in my opinion, can be compared to the results from acupuncture. If you've ever experienced lying on an examination table, having needles stuck into your flesh, and miraculously feeling, feeling a heck of a lot better soon after, you might more easily embrace the concept of a system of communication existing in the soft tissue of a human body.
Okay.
Unless, of course, you prefer to think of the power of acupuncture as magic. But even with all the talk of meridians within the body, no one seems to be able to
explain
pinpoint, pardon my pun, exactly why acupuncture works in medical terms, and specifically why a needle in one part of the body might heal a problem in another part.
Okay.
So
I suppose
this theory of connective tissue network, I'm sorry?
I was going to say, so if we're then kind of thinking about the question again, then you would disagree that in some cases it is more optimal to have the connective tissue tension and widen the diastasis for that individual person. You think that still the aim should be to close the diastasis?
Not necessarily close it. The aim is really to make my aim is really to make the connective tissue stronger.
Okay. Yeah. And then what I was going to ask.
So they don't have to close it 100%. It's good to make it smaller. And what happens as the connective tissue gets stronger, it does come together. All right. But to necessarily close it is not my goal as much as healing the connective tissue and making it stronger.
Okay, and able to transfer load again. Okay. And what about your upcoming research, Julie? I've seen you've been writing a wee bit about it on your website, and I'd like to hear more about your upcoming research.
Okay, well, I've been working with a woman. Her name is Samantha Gillard, and she is doing a 3-part study, and the first part has been published, and that research was published in Teesside University of Southampton, and it's called The Effects of Posture and Anatomical Location on Interrecti Distance, Measuring Ultrasound Imaging on Postnatal Women. So the first part of the study has found out that the interrecti distance has a postural effect and is wider in sitting and standing. So the results would suggest that if the interrecti distance is wider in sitting and standing, then these are good positions to do the exercises in, which is basically what the Tupler technique is doing. We do our the seated exercises, because I feel that it's important to strengthen transverse in a seated position first, because people can feel it in a seated and standing position easier than in a back-lying position. So I don't start any back-lying exercises until week 4, when my clients have transverse strength and awareness.
Okay. And what's the
so
next
I don't, so she's doing the research on her own, so it's, and working, so it's, taken a while. So I'll keep you posted when, the second and third part. There was actually some research that she sent me and asked me if I've seen, and it was these physical therapists out of Egypt, and it was published in the UK, and it was the efficacy of the Tupler technique in postnatal women, and they looked at splinting, but they never contacted me, and although the results were really good, it really misrepresented what I did. So I contacted the publisher, and this research has been pulled from the journal because it did not represent what the Tupler technique did.
Okay. And are they repeating it, or is there no? And
oh,
what?
I don't know. They haven't gotten back to me on it. They just pulled it from the journal
Okay.
because I felt it wasn't, as I said, it did not represent the Tupler technique.
And
I mean,
what?
the results were the results were good, but
Okay.
what they were doing in the study did not represent what it is that I do to get my results.
Okay. And in relation to Samantha, what do you know what she's looking at for stage 2 of her research?
I'm not, she prefers that I don't really talk about it.
Okay.
She she wants me to keep, but it does have to do with diastasis.
Okay. And does it have to do with the Tupler
other than
technique?
that, pardon me?
I was going to say, does it have
yes, we're looking at hoping that part 3 of it will include that.
Okay. And are you able to discuss your research that you're doing in the USA at the minute, Julie?
And on the what?
The research you're doing with the plasma cell.
Yes, of course.
Yay.
Of course, I can talk about that.
Okay.
I'm just trying to think of where to start here. Earlier this year, I think it was maybe February or March, Dr. Shanook Patel, a osteopathic physician in California, contacted me. He does a lot of work with people with back problems, and he, was very interested in the Tupler technique because, he felt if the muscles were separated, that he wasn't going to be getting the results that he wanted. So he was investigating diastasis. Now, Dr. Patel is a regenerative medicine physician, and he focuses on the musculoskeletal system. So I looked him up and saw under his name regenerative Regenex. So I looked that up and found out that it was a regenerative platelet procedure. And this procedure is about using the platelets. Platelets are found in your blood and are responsible for forming a clot when you cut yourself. So they're the first ones there to start the healing process, the platelets. And these platelets contain growth factors that are able to induce healing. So basically what you're doing is you're tricking. This whole procedure is about tricking the body by injecting platelets into thinking that it needs to be healed. All right. So so they use a custom processing of your blood. So they take a blood sample, a concentration of the platelets and growth factors. So they take out the red blood cells, and then you're left with the plasma. And in the plasma is the platelets. So they take those platelets out, and then they inject them into different parts of the body. Right now, they're doing it in the shoulders, the knees, and the spine. So it came to me that, gee, I wonder how it would work injecting it into the linea alba. So I spoke with him about it and asked him if he would be willing to do like a little project with that. And he spoke with the head of Regenex, and they were very interested in that. Now, Dr. Patel had said that one of his colleagues had done work with injecting into the linea alba with no success. And my feeling that no success was because if you just inject in there and you don't approximate the muscles and the connective tissue and then have that backward compression, that it's not going to work. I mean, my program works on its own, and my feeling was that giving the connective tissue a boost would speed up the healing process. And also, as I mentioned earlier, my feeling was that it's important in this healing process to make the connective tissue stronger. Okay? So that's what I felt that, because sometimes with these women, their connective tissue is so stretched out that it really takes such a long time. So this would speed up the process, and that's what I was hoping for. So so what we did was we had 8 women, and then a man joined us, and that was interesting. We took the measurements of the diastasis with ultrasound. We took the distance and we took the thickness of the connective tissue. We did this in week 1. We did this in beginning of week 4, week 6, and then again in week 18. And the procedure basically is he injects with ultrasound into the linea alba, and he injects, and it's very interesting when you see it via ultrasound and you see the platelets filling up the space. It's very interesting. But anyway, he injects the needle where the connective tissue, connects to the muscle right there on each side. So he did about, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 6 above and 6 below, depending upon, sometimes it was a little bit less if people, were, sometimes people are long-waisted, and sometimes people are short-waisted. So, less distance, from, the ribs to the pubic bone there. You understand, right?
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
So that would be, so they would, maybe he would do 4 below, and 4 above instead of 6 above and 6 below, depending upon the person. Anyway, what we found out was that my theory was correct. We saw results in 6 weeks that were much better than I normally see with clients just doing the Tupler technique. And we did observe that the connective tissue did continuously get thicker over 18 weeks. So we were, and the clients were thrilled. And Dr. Patel, when looking at the before and after pictures from week 1 to week 6 and week 18, was also astonished with the results.
Okay, good.
So we're going to be working on writing that up.
Okay.
And hopefully presenting at a Regenex conference and getting our results and our photos and statistics published in a medical journal. I am working with a New Jersey doctor. She's an OBGYN, and she is in the process of helping me put together my statistics, which have just been updated with 372 people and 1,000 observations. And those are on my website in detail and can be seen. But the thing that I can summarize is that it shows that in 6 weeks, if people do the program, they can get a 55%, they can make their diastasis 55% smaller.
Okay. Good.
Right? And we see also that the condition of the connective tissue also gets much better. So all those statistics are on the website and can be looked at, and they have been updated.
Good. Well, then my last question that I wanted to come to was, obviously I'm a women's health physiotherapist, and when I see people, even if I'm seeing them postnatally and they're coming and they want their diastasis checked, I obviously have the added ability to assess pelvic floor, because sometimes what we find internally in the pelvic floor can have an effect on their whole recruitment strategies and everything they're doing. Would you ever recommend that people go to a women's health physio either prior or during to starting the Tupler technique?
Absolutely. Absolutely, because I'm if I refer, I have a physical therapist, and I'm now training another physical therapist, and both of them do pelvic floor. So I recommend that they, if they have issues with that, I definitely recommend going to a pelvic floor, a person that specializes in that. I mean, I can talk to them about, there's a device called the Grainne, which helps doing the strengthening, but sometimes they're not there yet.
Yeah, and sometimes
they're not there yet to do that.
Particularly with
so they do need So they do need more specifics. So yes, I'm a big believer in referring to physical therapists for for pelvic floor. And as you know, there is a co-contraction between the transverse and the pubicoccygeusis muscle. So it's very important that they get this pelvic floor awareness.
Yeah, perfect.
Because sometimes just doing the exercises, if they're, if it's just too tight there, they need to learn how to relax it. And this is not something that, I don't have the machines and I don't do that.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I talk to them about the pelvic floor, where there are, and, if they have issues, and certainly, sometimes work concurrently.
Yeah, seeing someone.
With the two, with Jill, who, specializes. I'm actually training another physical therapist that does pelvic floor also, so I will be referring to both of them.
That's great.
And also I refer to Jill for the, she does the laser with the scar mobilization, and she does the organ mobilization. So I'm a big believer in that also.
Yeah, there's a lot of physios over here who do the visceral mobilization as well, so that's good. But yeah, as you've already said it, oftentimes with particularly postnatal women, young sporting women, anything like that, they can sometimes have overactive pelvic floor rather than weakness, and unless you sort that out, you're not going to sort out all their other issues as well. So that's spot on.
Right, exactly. So I am a big believer, in pelvic floor management, to see where they are with it. Yes.
Perfect. Well, no, that's been great, Julie.
And have that analyzed.
I appreciate you taking the time out to answer the questions, and I look forward to hearing about.
There is one other thing that I would like to mention.
Yes.
So if I might.
Sure.
I'd like to mention long-term results for clients that improve the diastasis with my technique. Because maintenance is always an issue. All right. And what I find is that, and I teach clients in week 6 of the program. The first 6 weeks of the program, I tell them just to do cardio, walking, going on a treadmill, no jumping, no running, because it's all about healing the connective tissue. So in the first 6 weeks, we want to allow the connective tissue to heal as they strengthen transverse. And then we want them to develop the awareness with activities of daily living of how to use the transverse when they stand up, engage, when they pick up their baby, when they sneeze, when they cough, when they go to the bathroom, all of this. So in week 6, we teach them how to now incorporate it into an exercise routine. If they've, closed their diastasis, then maintenance is one way. If they haven't, then maintenance is another way. Whichever way it is, we want it to be diastasis safe. So maintenance is all about remembering that force on the connective tissue will undo all of their gains. So, so we have to tell them to remember that, engaging the transverse, with activities of daily living, right? And then when exercising, that they need to know, are they able to engage the muscles when they do these activities, with these exercises? So to put their hand on their belly and know, is it in or is it out? Now, if they can't hold it in, they know it's one of two things. They're either not strong enough, their transverse isn't strong enough to do that, or they're in a position where it's physically impossible. So if they're doing rollbacks or roll-ups, they're not going to be able to hold their transverse in. Also with crunches, they're unable to. So we never want them to do crunches. We never want them to do those crossover crunches, all right, because that stretches the connective tissue forward and sideways. And, I let them know that there is a weak spot in their linea alba at their belly button. So they're always at risk for opening it up. So doing the little contracting exercises continuously, doing them, maintenance, would be, around 500 a day. And that's easy to do because you can do them when you're driving or when you're feeding your baby or at a meeting or whatever, because they're seated. You can get those done, and remembering to have that awareness to, when you stand up, when you sit down, when you sneeze, when you cough, when you go to the bathroom, so that it becomes more second nature to be able to use the transverse. So maintenance, as I said again, is all about remembering to use the transverse when you exercise. And we talk about when they exercise, the stabilization of bringing the ribs in and then the transverse in, maintaining that, and then doing our little 5 to 6 exercise on the work part of the exercise, which initially is sort of like patting your head and rubbing your belly. But once they get used to doing that, thinking about all the power coming from the center, the abdominals lifting the arms, the abdominals straightening the legs, with that, then it becomes a really more powerful workout than they've done in the past.
And building on that, Julie, first of all, to clarify, when you're saying that it's physically impossible when doing a head lift or a rollback, you mean it's physically impossible to engage it at 5 to 6 level? Because obviously we can...
No, it's physically impossible to gauge it at 5th floor.
Yes,
I mean, people
floor.
can sometimes bring it back a little bit, but when I talk about engagement, I'm bringing it all the way back with no movement as you do them. So if I'm bringing my belly button all the way back, as I say to my clients, all the way back to my inner spine, all right, I put my hand on my belly and then I bring my shoulders off the floor, you will feel a forward, you will feel the muscles going forward. You will feel that. And if it's going forward, all right, then, you're working the muscles in the wrong direction and you're putting force on the connective tissue.
Okay, so, and with, say, when we're thinking of transverse, I suppose when we think of our body and the transverse abdominis before diastasis and things like that, it's very much one of our postural endurance muscles. When you talk about even after the diastasis rehab, you would advise that people still do 5th to 6th floor on the work of the movements they're doing. Is that practical in relation to, I suppose, the underlying, I suppose, rationale of what that and function of that muscle?
I don't know. I've been doing it now, working out with it for for over 20 years, doing that type of a workout, and I do that with my clients and the people that have trained with me, and There haven't been any negative results that I know of.
Okay, good.
By having, it's really, about having that transverse strength and awareness.
Okay.
So yes, I think it's I think it's important to be doing that. I mean, when I work out, with every repetition that I do, I'm either keeping the transverse at fifth, or I'm moving that fifth to sixth movement.
Okay.
On the work part of the exercise.
I'm sure you get questioned about that from time to time from different medical professionals. I'm sure that's one of the things, because I suppose for anybody who trained in the Pilates field of things, we've always been taught to kind of submaximally recruit transverse, kind of like 30% level. So this is a big shift from what that would say. So I'm sure you get questioned about that from time to time.
I haven't gotten that many questions on that. No, I mean, the medical professionals that I work with all think it's here in in the U.S. all think it's a great idea.
Okay, that's
to
good.
to do it that way. So no, I haven't really been questioned about that.
Well, you have now. But no, Julie, you've been really good at answering those questions. It's great to clarify, and it's been good to speak to you. And I'm just going to stop the recording now if I can figure out. There we go.